Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished fixing the broken air filter in Section 7 of Kepler Station. His blue work uniform was dirty and his hands were covered in grease, but he smiled anyway. Another job done meant another 50 credits in his account. Every credit counted when you were saving for engineering school. The young man picked up his tool bag and started walking back to the maintenance office. At 22 years old, Jake had been working on the space station for 3 years. He knew every pipe, every wire, and every shortcut through the massive structure that housed over 50,000 beings from across the galaxy. Today, he decided to take his favorite shortcut through the commercial district. It would save him 10 minutes of walking through the crowded main corridors. Jake pushed open a heavy door marked Authorized Personnel Only and stepped into a narrow hallway that ran behind the shops and restaurants. As he walked, he could hear voices and strange sounds coming from somewhere nearby. Jake frowned. This area was supposed to be quiet. He followed the noise until he found himself standing in front of another door. The sounds were much louder now. There was shouting, strange animal calls, and what sounded like a crowd of people. Jake checked his watch. He had 15 minutes before his shift ended. His curiosity got the better of him, and he pushed open the door. The smell hit him first. It was a mix of different alien scents, some pleasant and others not so much. Jake found himself looking into a large room filled with cages and enclosures. Hundreds of beings were gathered around, looking at the creatures inside the cages. Some were pointing and laughing, others were making bids and waving their hands in the air. Jake realized he had stumbled into Kepler Station's weekly exotic pet auction. He had heard about it but never seen it before. Rich traders and collectors came here to buy rare animals from distant planets. The prices were usually too high for someone like Jake to even think about. He was about to leave when something caught his eye. In a corner of the room, far from the main crowd, was a small cage that looked dirty and neglected. Inside was a creature. Unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It looked somewhat like the dogs Jake remembered from his childhood on Earth, but different in many ways. This creature had 6 legs instead of 4. Its fur seemed to be made of tiny crystals that caught the light and sparkled. The fur should have been beautiful, but right now it looked dull and gray. Like all the color had been drained from it. The creature was about the size of a medium dog, but it was curled up in the back corner of its cage. Its large amber eyes stared at nothing, and it seemed to be trying to make itself as small as possible. Jake could see that the creature was clean, but its cage was not. Food and water bowls sat empty in front of it. Jake moved closer to get a better look. The creature's ears twitched slightly, but it did not look at him. Even from a distance, Jake could see sadness in those big amber eyes. Something about the creature reminded him of his old dog Rex, who had died when Jake was 15. "Attention, beings of all species," shouted a loud voice from the front of the room. Jake looked up to see a tall, green-skinned alien standing on a platform. The alien wore expensive clothes and had too many teeth in his smile. "We now come to lot number 47. A genuine Lumina hound from the planet Etherian." The crowd's attention turned to the corner where Jake was standing. Several people moved closer to look at the creature in the dirty cage. Jake stepped back to make room, but he kept watching. "This specimen is called Zara," the auctioneer continued. His name tag read Vex in several different languages. "As you all know, Etherian was destroyed 6 months ago when their sun collapsed. This makes Lumina hounds extremely rare. In fact, this may be the last one in existence." A few people in the crowd made excited noises. Jake felt sick to his stomach. The creature's entire planet was gone? She was the last of her kind? "Now, I must be honest with you," Vex continued, his smile becoming less friendly. "This particular specimen has some issues. She does not respond to commands. She will not perform tricks. She barely eats. Some might call her defective." Jake watched as Zara seemed to curl up even smaller in her cage. Her crystal fur became even more gray and dull. "But think of the possibilities," Vex shouted, trying to get the crowd excited again. "A unique creature, the last of her species. Surely someone here can train her properly." The bidding started. At 500 credits? Jake's eyes went wide. That was more money than he made in a month. But as the minutes passed, something strange happened. The bids got lower instead of higher. 400 credits, called out a wealthy-looking human woman. 300, shouted a reptilian alien in fancy clothes. 200 credits, said another voice. Jake watched as people tried to get Zara's attention. They called to her, made clicking sounds, and even banged on her cage. Zara did not move. She did not look at them. She just lay there with her dull gray fur, staring at nothing. One by one, the bidders lost interest and walked away. Jake heard them complaining to each other. What good is a pet that won't even look at you? 5,000 credits for a broken animal? I think not. It's probably sick, not worth the risk. Soon, only a few people were left bidding. The price kept dropping. 100 credits, Vex called out. His smile was completely gone now. Do I hear 100 credits for this rare and exotic creature? No one answered. Jake could see that. Vex was getting angry. 75 credits. Surely someone wants this unique specimen. Still no response from the crowd. Most people had moved on to look at other animals. Jake found himself alone near Zara's cage. 50 credits. Vex shouted. 50 credits is my final offer. If no one bids, this creature goes to the processing centers for biological materials. Jake's blood went cold. Processing centers? They were going to kill her? He looked at Zara again. She was so small and sad, lying there in her dirty cage. Her amber eyes seemed to hold so much pain. Jake thought about his old dog Rex, and how Rex had looked at him with complete trust and love. This creature was alone in the universe. Her whole planet was gone. Her species was extinct. And now they were going to kill her because she would not do tricks for strangers. Jake looked at his account balance on his wrist device. He had exactly 53 credits saved up. It was every penny he had been saving for engineering school. It represented months of eating cheap food and working extra shifts. 50 credits? Jake called out before he could stop himself. The whole room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at him. Vex smiled his too-wide smile again. We have a bid of 50 credits from the young human. Do I hear 55? Jake held his breath. Please, he thought. Please let no one else bid. After 30 seconds that felt like hours, Vex brought down his hammer. Sold to the young human for 50 credits. Jake's hands shook as he transferred the money from his account. In just a few seconds, he had spent his entire life savings on a creature he knew nothing about. His dreams of engineering school would have to wait, but as he looked at Zara, still curled up in her cage, he knew he had made the right choice. No living being should die just because they were too sad to perform tricks. Jake Morrison had just bought himself an alien dog. He had no idea that this simple act of kindness would soon change the entire galaxy. Jake carried the cage through the station corridors, trying not to think about what he had just done. 50 credits was all the money he had in the world. His friends would think he was crazy. His supervisor would probably laugh at him. But every time he looked down at the small creature huddled in the corner of the cage, he knew he could not have done anything else. The cage was heavier than it looked. Zara did not move during the entire trip to Jake's quarters. She stayed curled up in the back corner, her dull gray fur barely catching the light from the corridor lamps. Jake tried talking to her as they walked, but she did not respond. It's okay, girl, Jake said softly. We're going to my place. It's not much, but it's better than that dirty cage. Jake's quarters were small, even by station standards. He had one room that served as bedroom, kitchen, and living area. There was a tiny bathroom and barely enough space for his bed, desk, and a few personal items. It was all he could afford on a maintenance worker's salary. He set the cage down in the middle of the room and opened the door. Zara did not move. Jake waited for several minutes, but she just stayed in the same position, staring at nothing. You can come out now, Jake said. You're safe here. Still nothing. Jake remembered reading somewhere that scared animals needed time and space. He decided to leave the cage door open and let Zara come out when she was ready. Jake went about his evening routine. He heated up a simple dinner and sat at his small desk to work on his engineering homework. He was taking online classes from Earth University, hoping to earn his degree while working. The courses were hard, but Jake was determined to better himself. Every few minutes he glanced over at the cage. Zara had not moved. Her fur remained the same dull gray color. Jake wondered if she was sick or just very scared. Before going to bed, Jake put a bowl of water and some food near the cage. He had stopped at the station's pet supply store and bought the most expensive alien pet food they had. The clerk had told him it was good for most species. "Good night, Zara," Jake said as he turned off the lights. Jake woke up the next morning to find that the food and water were untouched. Zara was in exactly the same position as before. Jake started to worry. How long could she go without eating or drinking? He got ready for work and talked to Zara while he put on his uniform. "I have to go to work now, but I'll be back this afternoon. Please try to eat something, okay? I know everything is scary right now, but you're safe here. I promise." Jake left fresh food and water before he went to work. All day long he worried about Zara. What if she died while he was gone? What if he had rescued her from the auction just to watch her die in his quarters? When Jake came home that evening, he found that Zara had finally come out of the cage. She was lying under his desk, still curled up in a small ball. The food and water were still untouched, but at least she had moved. "Hey there," Jake said quietly. "I'm glad you came out." Zara's ears twitched slightly, but she did not look at him. Jake sat down on his bed and pulled out his homework. He had a difficult math problem to solve for his engineering class. This became their routine for the next several days. Jake would go to work, come home, and do his homework while Zara hid under the desk. She would eat and drink small amounts when Jake was not looking, but she never acknowledged his presence. Jake tried different approaches. He offered her different foods. He tried sitting closer to her. He even tried ignoring her completely. Nothing worked. Zara remained a gray, sad shadow under his desk. On the 5th day, Jake decided to try something different. His mother had sent him a music player with songs from Earth. Jake had not listened to it much because he was usually too busy with work and studying. But tonight he turned it on while doing his homework. The first song was an old ballad about love and loss. Jake had always liked it because it reminded him of home. As the music filled the small room, Jake noticed something amazing. Zara's ears perked up. For the first time since he had brought her home, she lifted her head and looked around. Her fur, which had been gray for days, began to show tiny hints of blue around the edges. Jake tried not to move or make any sudden sounds. He just kept working on his math problem while the music played. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Zara listening. When the song ended, Zara put her head back down and her fur returned to gray. But Jake had seen the change. Music had gotten her attention when nothing else could. The next evening, Jake played music again. This time, he chose a happy song about friendship. Zara's reaction was even stronger. Her fur showed more blue, as she even sat up a little bit. Jake realized that her fur was not just changing color randomly. It seemed to reflect her emotions. Over the next few days, Jake experimented with different types of music. Sad songs made Zara's fur turn darker. Happy songs brought out blues and even some green. Fast songs made her fur show quick, moving patterns. Slow songs made the colors flow gently across her crystal fur. Jake began to understand that Zara was not just a simple animal. She was responding to the emotions in the music. She could feel what the songs were trying to express. That meant she was much more intelligent than anyone at the auction had realized. 2 weeks after bringing Zara home, Jake caught a bad case of Rigelian flu. It was a common illness on the station, but it made him feel terrible. He had a high fever, body aches, and could barely get out of bed. Jake called in sick to work and spent the day lying in bed, feeling miserable. He had no energy to do anything except sleep and drink water. He was worried about Zara, but he was too sick to take care of her properly. That evening, Jake woke up from a fevered sleep to find something surprising. Zara was no longer under the desk. She was sitting next to his bed, looking at him with her large amber eyes. "Hey there, girl," Jake whispered. His voice was weak and raspy. For the first time, Zara responded. She made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Then she did something that amazed Jake. She jumped up onto the bed and curled up next to him. Jake was too sick to move away, even if he had wanted to. Zara pressed her warm body against his side. Her fur began to glow with a soft green light that was beautiful to see. As the green light surrounded him, Jake felt something incredible happening. The pain in his body began to fade. His fever started to go down. The aches and pains that had kept him awake all night slowly disappeared. Jake fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. When he woke up the next morning, he felt completely better. The flu was gone. He felt stronger and healthier than he had in months. Zara was still lying next to him, but her fur had returned to its normal crystal appearance. She was looking at him with what Jake could only describe as concern. "Did you heal me?" Jake asked in amazement. Zara tilted her head and made that soft purring sound again. Jake reached out slowly and gently touched her fur. It was warm and soft, and he could feel a slight vibration like a very quiet engine running. "You're not just a pet, are you?" Jake said. "You're something much more special." That day, Jake called in sick to work again, even though he felt fine. He wanted to spend time with Zara and try to understand what had happened. For the first time since he had brought her home, she seemed willing to interact with him. Jake sat on the floor near his bed and waited. After a few minutes, Zara came over and sat next to him. Her fur showed gentle waves of blue and green. Jake could tell she was feeling calmer and maybe even a little happy. "I don't know what you are or where you came from," Jake said softly, "but I'm glad you're here. You're not alone anymore, and neither am I." Zara looked up at him, and her fur sparkled with warm golden colors. Jake smiled. They were beginning to understand each other, but Jake had no idea that Zara was about to show him something that would change everything he thought he knew about intelligence, technology, and the universe itself. Jake woke up early the next morning, feeling more rested than he had in weeks. Zara was still sleeping next to him on the bed, her crystal fur glowing softly in the dim light. Jake watched her breathe and wondered what other abilities she might have. After getting dressed for work, Jake noticed something strange. Zara was sitting at his desk looking at his tablet computer. The screen was on, showing the station's main information network. Jake was sure he had turned it off the night before. "Did you turn that on?" Jake asked. Zara looked at him and her fur showed quick flashes of different colors. Jake sat down next to her and looked at the screen. Someone had been accessing files about Kepler Station's systems and databases. The access logs showed activity during the night when Jake was sleeping. Jake looked at Zara more carefully. Her paws were much more flexible than he had first thought. The ends almost looked like fingers. Could she actually use a computer? "Show me," Jake said quietly. Zara tilted her head and looked at the tablet. She reached out with one paw and touched the screen. Her movements were careful and precise. She opened a file about the station's power systems and then looked at Jake. Jake's mouth fell open. Zara was not just touching the screen randomly. She knew exactly what she was doing. She understood technology. "This is impossible," Jake whispered. "You're just you're—" Zara made her soft purring sound and touched the screen again. This time she opened a star chart showing the galaxy. She moved her paw across the screen, zooming in on a particular area. Jake saw a star system that was marked as destroyed in red letters. "Etherian," Jake read aloud. "Your home planet." Zara's fur turned deep blue with silver streaks. Jake could feel sadness coming from her like waves. She touched the screen again and showed him pictures of Etherian before it was destroyed. It had been a beautiful world with crystal cities and flowing rivers. Then Zara did something that made Jake's heart stop. Her fur began to change in a way he had never seen before. Instead of solid colors, complex patterns appeared across her body. Mathematical equations, star charts, and geometric shapes flowed across her crystal fur like a living computer screen. The patterns were so detailed and complex that Jake could barely follow them. But some of the math looked familiar from his engineering classes. Zara was showing him scientific formulas and technical diagrams through her fur. You're trying to tell me something important, Jake said. But I don't understand all of this. Zara stopped the light show and looked at Jake. With her intelligent amber eyes, she went back to the tablet and began opening more files. This time she accessed Jake's maintenance clearance codes and used them to reach restricted databases. Jake should have stopped her. Using his clearance for unauthorized access could get him fired or even arrested. But he was too amazed to do anything except watch. Zara pulled up files about medical research, genetic science, and healing technologies. She seemed to be looking for something specific. Finally, she found what she wanted. It was a research paper about memory storage and biological systems. Zara's fur began glowing again, but this time the patterns were different. They looked like DNA structures and genetic codes. Jake realized she was showing him something about biology and genetics. You store information in your genes, Jake said suddenly. That's why your fur can make these patterns. You're like a living computer. Zara's fur flashed bright gold. Jake took that as a yes. Over the next hour, Zara showed Jake more and more information through her fur patterns and the tablet. Jake began to understand that she was not just intelligent. She was a scholar, a scientist, and a keeper of knowledge. The people of Etherian had developed a way to store their civilization's knowledge in living beings. Instead of keeping information in computers or books, they created special individuals who could carry entire libraries of knowledge in their genetic structure. Zara was one of these living libraries. You're not just the last of your species, Jake said in amazement. You're carrying the knowledge of your entire civilization. Zara's fur showed complex spiraling patterns that reminded Jake of galaxies and stars. But mixed in with the beautiful patterns were darker images. Jake saw what looked like explosions, destruction, and death. Someone destroyed your planet on purpose, Jake said. It wasn't just a natural disaster. Zara's fur turned black with red streaks. Jake could feel anger and grief coming from her. She showed him images through her fur of large warships and alien soldiers. The attackers wore uniforms with a symbol that looked like a closed fist crushing a star. Jake had seen that symbol before. It belonged to the Hegemony Empire, a group of aggressive species that controlled large parts of the galaxy. They were known for taking over planets and enslaving their populations. Jake had always thought they were just bullies who wanted power and resources, but now he understood something much worse. The Hegemony did not just want to rule other planets. They wanted to steal the knowledge and culture of every advanced civilization they could find. They destroyed entire species to take their accumulated wisdom and technology. They came to Etherian to steal your knowledge, Jake said. And when your people wouldn't give it to them, they destroyed everything. Zara's fur showed the final moments of Etherian. Jake saw crystal cities burning and her people dying. He felt Zara's pain as she watched her entire world end. She had been rescued by chance, pulled from the wreckage by salvage crews who did not understand what they had found. You've been carrying all of this alone, Jake said softly. The knowledge of billions of people and the memory of watching them all die. Jake understood now why Zara had seemed so broken at the auction. She was not defective or damaged. She was traumatized and grieving. She had refused to perform tricks or respond to commands because she knew that most beings would only want to exploit her abilities, but Jake was different. He had bought her not because he wanted to use her, but because he wanted to save her. He had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. For the first time since losing her world, Zara had found someone she could trust. What do you want to do now? Jake asked. How can I help you? Zara's fur began showing new patterns. These were not sad memories or complex scientific formulas. They were plans and ideas. Jake saw images of medical devices, healing technologies, and scientific instruments. You want to use your knowledge to help people, Jake said. You want to make sure your people's wisdom is not lost. Zara made her purring sound and her fur glowed warm gold. She touched the tablet again and pulled up Jake's engineering homework. She looked at his math problems and then showed him solutions through her fur patterns. but these were not just the answers to his homework. Zara was showing him advanced engineering concepts that went far beyond anything Jake had learned in school. She was teaching him how to combine her people's biotechnology with human engineering. Jake spent the rest of the day learning from Zara. She showed him how to create new materials using biological processes. She taught him about energy systems that could heal living tissue. She shared mathematical concepts that could revolutionize space travel and communication. By evening, Jake's head was spinning with new knowledge. He felt like he had learned more in one day than in his entire life before. "This is incredible," Jake said. "Your people's knowledge could change everything. It could help cure diseases and hunger, maybe even bring peace to the galaxy." Zara's fur showed gentle waves of blue and green. But then darker patterns appeared, reminding Jake of the hegemony ships and the destruction of Etherian. "You're worried about the wrong people getting this knowledge," Jake said. "You're afraid the hegemony will find you." Zara nodded, something Jake had never seen her do before. Her fur showed images of the auction house and the various beings who had tried to buy her. Some of them had worn clothes with symbols that Jake now recognized as connected to the hegemony. "They're already looking for you," Jake realized. "That's why you hid your abilities at the auction. You knew some of those buyers worked for the hegemony." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If the hegemony found Zara, they would not care about her feelings or her grief. They would force her to give them all of Etherian's knowledge and then probably kill her to prevent anyone else from learning it. But Jake also realized something else. Zara had chosen to trust him with the most precious thing in the galaxy. The accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization was now in his small quarters on Kepler Station. And somehow it was up to Jake Morrison, a simple maintenance worker, to protect it. "We need to be very careful," Jake said. "If the wrong people find out what you really are." Zara's fur flashed with determined gold patterns. She was not going to hide anymore. She had found someone worthy of her trust, and together they were going to make sure her people's legacy lived on. Jake looked at his new friend and partner, and he knew that his quiet life on Kepler Station was about to become very complicated. 3 weeks after learning about Zara's true nature, Jake had become a different person. Every spare moment was spent learning from her. She taught him advanced healing techniques using biological materials found right on the station. Jake started creating simple medical compounds in his quarters using Zara's knowledge and basic chemistry equipment. The first breakthrough came when Jake's neighbor, an elderly Martian woman named Rose, cut her hand badly on a broken pipe. Jake offered to help and used one of his new healing compounds. Rose's wound healed completely in just 2 hours. Leaving no scar, word traveled fast in the small community of station workers. Soon other people were asking Jake for help with minor injuries and illnesses. Jake was careful to make his treatments seem like lucky accidents or simple first aid. But the results were remarkable. Dr. Lisa Chun noticed the pattern first. As the head doctor in Kepler Station's medical bay, she kept track of unusual healing cases. When 5 different people mentioned getting amazing treatments from that maintenance guy in Section 12, she decided to investigate. Dr. Chun found Jake in the station's hydroponics bay, where he was growing special plants using techniques Zara had taught him. The plants looked normal, but they contained healing properties that should have been impossible. "Jake Morrison?" Dr. Chun said, approaching him carefully. "I'm Dr. Chun from the medical bay. I need to ask you some questions about your recent medical treatments." Jake's heart started racing. He had been expecting this conversation, but he still was not ready for it. "I don't know what you mean," Jake said, trying to sound innocent. "I just help people with basic first aid sometimes." Dr. Chun smiled. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but Jake could tell she was very intelligent. "Basic first aid does not regrow nerve tissue," Dr. Chun said. "Peter Martinez had a damaged spinal nerve that had been bothering him for years. After you treated his back pain, the nerve was completely healed. That's not possible with any known medicine." Jake looked around to make sure no one else was listening. The hydroponics bay was usually empty at this time of day. Can we talk somewhere private? Jake asked. Dr. Chun agreed, and Jake led her to his quarters. Zara was waiting inside, lying on the bed. When she saw Dr. Chun, her fur immediately turned cautious yellow with green stripes. "This is Zara," Jake said. "She's the one who has been helping me." Dr. Chun stared at Zara in amazement. She had never seen a Lumina hound before, but she knew enough about alien biology to recognize that Zara was something special. "The patterns in her fur," Dr. Chun whispered. "Those are molecular structures. She's showing me chemical formulas." Zara looked at Jake and he nodded. Slowly, Zara's fur began displaying more complex patterns. She showed Dr. Chun advanced medical techniques and biological processes that were far beyond anything humans had discovered. Dr. Chun sat down heavily in Jake's chair. As a scientist, she understood immediately what she was seeing. "She's carrying the medical knowledge of an entire civilization," Dr. Chun said. "This is the most important discovery in human history." Jake explained everything to Dr. Chun. He told her about the auction, about learning to communicate with Zara, and about the hegemony's destruction of Etherian. Dr. Chun listened with growing amazement and horror. "We have to be very careful," Dr. Chun said finally. "If word of this gets out, every government and corporation in the galaxy will want to get their hands on her." That night, the three of them worked together to create a plan. Dr. Chen would help Jake set up a small, secret medical research lab. They would use Zara's knowledge to develop new treatments, but they would be very careful about how they introduced them to the world. For 2 weeks, their plan worked perfectly. Jake continued his maintenance job during the day and worked in the secret lab at night. Dr. Chun helped him understand the more complex medical concepts that Zara shared. Together, they created medicines that could heal injuries in hours instead of weeks, but their secret did not stay hidden for long. Jake was working late in the lab when Zara suddenly became agitated. Her fur turned dark red with black stripes, colors Jake had never seen before. She ran to his tablet and quickly accessed the station's external sensor data. 3 large ships had just arrived in the Kepler system. They were flying hegemony flags and requesting permission to dock. The ships were much larger than normal diplomatic vessels, and they carried heavy weapons. "They found us," Jake said, his voice shaking. Zara's fur showed images of the ships scanning the station. The hegemony had developed sensors that could detect Etherian biotechnology. They knew she was here. Jake called Dr. Chun immediately. She arrived at his quarters within minutes, looking worried and scared. "The hegemony ships are demanding to inspect the station," Dr. Chun said. "They claim they're looking for stolen biological materials. Station Command does not want to let them aboard, but they're threatening to attack if we refuse." Commander Bob Martinez, the station's security chief, arrived shortly after Dr. Chun. Bob was a tough former military officer who had always been fair to the station workers. Jake had fixed the air conditioning in Bob's office many times, and they had become friends. "Jake, Dr. Chun tells me you two have something the hegemony wants," Bob said. "I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Jake introduced Bob to Zara and explained the situation. Bob listened carefully, asking practical questions about the hegemony's capabilities and what they might do. "They'll tear the station apart looking for her," Bob said grimly. "And once they find her, they'll kill anyone who knows about her abilities." Bob had fought against hegemony forces during his military service. He knew how ruthless they could be. "We have 3 hours before they dock," Bob continued. "I can delay them a little longer, but not much. We need to get Zara off the station." But Zara had a different idea. Her fur began showing complex patterns. That took Jake several minutes to understand. She was not going to run away. She wanted to fight back. "She says we can't keep running forever," Jake translated. "The hegemony will never stop hunting her. But if we can share her knowledge with enough people, they won't be able to control it anymore." Dr. Chun understood immediately. "If we can get Etherian's medical knowledge to scientists across the galaxy, the hegemony can't suppress it. But how do we do that in just 3 hours?" Zara showed them a plan through her fur patterns. It was dangerous and might not work, but it was their only chance. She wanted to create a massive data transmission that would broadcast her knowledge to every major research facility in the galaxy. The station's communication array is powerful enough, Bob said. But the hegemony will detect the transmission and try to stop it. Then we need a distraction, Jake said. Something to keep them busy while Zara uploads her knowledge. Bob smiled grimly. I can give you a distraction. My security teams have been looking for a chance to fight back against hegemony bullying, but once we start shooting, there's no going back. Dr. Chun looked worried. This could start a war. The war already started when they destroyed Etherian, Jake said. We're just choosing which side we're on. The next 2 hours were a frantic rush of preparation. Bob gathered his most trusted security officers and explained the situation. To Jake's surprise, every single officer volunteered to help. They had all heard stories about hegemony atrocities, and they were ready to fight. Dr. Chun worked with the station's communication specialists to prepare the data transmission systems. They would need to send enormous amounts of information. Very quickly, before the hegemony could stop them, Jake spent the time with Zara, helping her organize her knowledge for the upload. She showed him hundreds of years of Etherian medical research, from simple healing techniques to advanced genetic therapies. Are you sure about this? Jake asked her. Once this knowledge is out there, you won't be the only one who has it anymore. Zara's fur glowed with warm gold patterns. She was ready to share her people's greatest gift with the galaxy. She had been alone with her knowledge for too long. 30 minutes before the hegemony ships were scheduled to dock, station sensors detected something alarming. The ships were not just carrying diplomats and soldiers, they had brought scientists and biological research equipment. They were planning to study Zara right there on the station. They're not just here to capture her, Dr. Chun said with horror. They're going to experiment on her. Bob's expression turned dark. Not while I'm in charge of this station. As the hegemony ships approached the docking bays, Jake sat with Zara in the station's main communication center. Her fur was glowing, brighter than he had ever seen, preparing to share the accumulated wisdom of her entire civilization. Jake held her gently and whispered, Whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. And your people's knowledge will live on? Outside, Bob's security teams took their positions. Dr. Chun monitored the transmission equipment. And across the galaxy, research facilities began receiving the most important scientific data in galactic history. The battle for Etherian's legacy was about to begin. The hegemony ships docked with Kepler Station exactly on schedule. Jake watched through the security cameras as soldiers in black armor marched through the station corridors. Their leader was a tall, cruel-looking alien with gray skin and cold, yellow eyes. His uniform showed that he was Commander Thane, one of the hegemony's most feared officers. Attention, station personnel. Commander Thane's voice echoed through the communication system. We are conducting a search for stolen biological materials. Anyone who interferes will be considered an enemy of the hegemony empire. Jake felt Zara trembling next to him in the communication center. Her fur had turned dark blue with silver streaks, showing her fear and determination. Dr. Chun was at the main console, making final preparations for the knowledge transmission. Bob Martinez spoke quietly into his radio, coordinating with his security teams throughout the station. Remember the plan, Bob said to Jake and Dr. Chun. When I give the signal, you start the transmission. No matter what happens to us, that knowledge has to get out. Jake nodded, but his hands were shaking. He was just a maintenance worker. A few months ago, his biggest worry was saving money for school. Now he was about to help start a war against one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Zara pressed against Jake's leg and looked up at him with her intelligent amber eyes. Her fur showed gentle gold patterns that Jake had learned meant trust and friendship. She was telling him that everything would be okay. We can do this, Jake whispered to her. Your people's knowledge will survive. The first sign of trouble came from the lower levels. Bob's security teams reported that hegemony soldiers were not just searching random areas. They were heading directly toward the communication center and Jake's quarters. Someone had told them exactly where to look. "They have inside information," Bob said grimly. "We have a spy on the station." Jake felt his heart sink. If the hegemony knew their exact location, the plan might fail before it even started, but Zara had been listening to the radio chatter. Suddenly, her fur began showing complex mathematical patterns. She was analyzing the soldiers' movements and predicting their routes through the station. "She's helping us plan our defense," Dr. Chun said. In amazement, "She's using her knowledge to track their positions." Zara's tactical information allowed Bob's teams to set up ambush and diversions. The first group of hegemony soldiers walked right into a trap in Section 4. Station security officers used stun weapons and maintenance tools to overwhelm the heavily armed invaders. "Transmission ready," Dr. Chun announced. "We can begin uploading Zara's knowledge whenever you're ready." Jake looked at Zara one more time. Once they started the transmission, there would be no going back. The hegemony would know exactly where they were, and they would come with everything they had. "Do it," Jake said. Zara placed her paws on the communication console. Her crystal fur began glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen. Streams of light flowed from her body into the station's computers. Years of accumulated knowledge began uploading to transmission arrays across the galaxy. The effect was immediate and amazing. Every major research facility in human space began receiving detailed medical and scientific data. Universities on Earth, Mars, and dozens of other worlds suddenly had access to healing technologies that could save millions of lives, but the transmission was not limited to human space. Zara's knowledge reached alien research centers as well. Scientists from hundreds of different species began receiving information about advanced biotechnology, genetic healing, and medical techniques that their civilizations had never imagined. "It's working," Dr. Chun shouted. "We're getting confirmation. Signals from research centers across the galaxy. They're receiving the data." Commander Thane's voice cut through the celebration. He had found them. "End this transmission immediately," Thane demanded from the doorway. Behind him stood a squad of heavily armed soldiers. "That biological specimen belongs to the hegemony?" "Empire." Bob Martinez stepped between the soldiers and the communication console. His security officers moved to support him, but they were badly outnumbered. "Zara doesn't belong to anyone," Jake said, standing up to face the hegemony commander. "She's a free being, and she's choosing to share her knowledge with the galaxy." Commander Thane laughed coldly. "Free beings? These creatures are biological storage devices created by a dead civilization. They exist only to serve their betters." Jake felt anger rising inside him. This alien had probably been there when Etherian was destroyed. He had watched billions of innocent beings die just to steal their knowledge. "You're wrong," Jake said. "Zara is my friend. She thinks she feels, and she chose to trust me. That makes her more human than you'll ever be." Something unexpected happened then. As Jake spoke about friendship and trust, Zara's fur began showing new patterns. But these patterns were not just visible to the people in the room. The transmission system was still active, and Zara's emotional responses were being broadcast along with her scientific knowledge across the galaxy. Beings who were receiving Etherian's medical data also began experiencing Zara's memories and emotions. They felt her grief over losing her people. They experienced her loneliness and fear. And they shared her growing hope as she learned to trust Jake. The effect was more powerful than any scientific data. Research centers that had been simply cataloging new medical information suddenly understood the personal cost of that knowledge. They realized that they were receiving the last testament of an entire civilization on Earth. Dr. Richard Brown was analyzing Etherian genetic therapy techniques when he suddenly felt overwhelming sadness. He experienced Zara's memories of watching her world burn. In that moment, he understood that he was not just looking at scientific data. He was touching the soul of someone who had lost everything. Similar experiences were happening across the galaxy. Scientists, doctors, and researchers from dozens of species were sharing Zara's emotional journey. They felt her pain, her courage, and her determination to keep her people's legacy alive. Commander Thane noticed that his soldiers were hesitating. Some of them were looking at Zara with confusion instead of following orders to capture her. "What are you waiting for?" Thane shouted, "Secure that specimen." But the soldiers had heard the reports from their homeworlds. The hegemony's own scientists were receiving Etherian knowledge and experiencing Zara's memories. Word was spreading quickly through hegemony space that their empire had committed genocide against a peaceful, healing-focused civilization. "Sir," one of the soldiers said quietly, "Command is ordering us to return to the ships immediately." Thane's yellow eyes blazed with fury. "I give the orders here," but it was too late. The emotional transmission had triggered something the hegemony had never faced before. Their own people were learning the truth about what their empire really did. Across hegemony space, citizens were demanding answers about the destruction of Etherian. More importantly, other civilizations were responding to the shared emotional experience. Species that had never worked together before were uniting in outrage over the genocide. The hegemony's victims were organizing resistance movements. Their enemies were forming alliances. On Kepler Station, the tide of battle turned quickly. Station personnel who had been hiding in their quarters emerged to help fight the invaders. Even civilians picked up tools and improvised weapons to defend. Zara and her knowledge. Commander Thane found himself surrounded by angry beings from a dozen different species. They were all united by the shared experience of Zara's courage and Jake's compassion. "This is not over," Thane said as he and his remaining soldiers retreated toward their ships. "The hegemony will not forget this defiance." But Jake knew that Thane was wrong. This was over. The knowledge of Etherian was now spread across the galaxy, protected by millions of beings who understood its value. The hegemony could never suppress or control it again. As the hegemony ships fled Kepler Station, Jake sat with Zara in the communication center. Her fur was glowing with warm, peaceful colors. For the first time since losing her world, she looked truly happy. "You did it," Jake said softly. "Your people's knowledge will help beings across the galaxy, and everyone will remember what the hegemony did to Etherian." Dr. Chun reported that research centers everywhere were already using Etherian medical techniques to save lives. Diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries were being cured. The knowledge that Zara had carried alone for so long was now helping millions of beings. 6 months later, Jake stood in the grand opening ceremony of the Etherian Memorial Medical Center on Kepler Station. Beings from across the galaxy had come to study healing techniques and to honor the memory of Zara's people. Jake was no longer a maintenance worker. He had become a bridge between human engineering and Etherian biotechnology. But more importantly, he was Zara's friend and partner in keeping her civilization's legacy alive. Zara was no longer the last of her kind either. Using her genetic memories, scientists had successfully created new Lumina hounds. The species would survive, protected now by an alliance of free civilizations. Jake watched as young beings from dozens of species learned healing arts from Zara and her children. The simple act of buying a sad alien dog for 50 credits had grown into a galactic movement for cooperation and mutual aid.